It is 8:30 on the East Coast. It is 7:30 where I live in Niceville, Florida. It is time for the Sit Down with LB. Good evening, everyone. Hello again. It's me, LB, here on the Sit Down with LB. Thank you, all of you that are already tuned in for what promises to be, hopefully, a very enlightening and enjoyable session on this series inside the industry on the Sit Down with LB. I have two wonderful guests that are here tonight to talk all about their industry, what their work in this industry and the importance of it. I will be joined by two great people. And I just hung up on Matthew, who was just calling in. I'm going to tell him to call back. 1 second. Give me a second. Call back in. Okay. Anyway, so navigating all this stuff. And so, yes, I am excited about tonight, as I was saying before. And we're going to have a wonderful session with these two wonderful gentlemen. We're going to talk about agents and artist manager, and I'm going to ask them the question: do they like the term agent, or do they prefer artist manager? Does it make them feel some kind of way to hear that? So that's just one of the many questions. But also for you that are following Wes Krulich and Rachel Cooper and all of you who are following along, make sure you let us know where you're listening for, because it's nice to always hear from you. And if you put a question in the chat box, hopefully I will be able to get to you. Hello, Judy Jermaine from Dallas. It's nice to have you here with us. I can't promise that I'll get to all of the questions, but I'll try to get to a few of them if I can. Hello, E. Kristen O'Keefe. Thank you for joining in. I'm not going to talk too long because I want these guys to get in here and be under the gun with me. And so I'm definitely going to enjoy chatting with them. I have Alex Fletcher with Fletcher Artist Management joining me, and I also have my manager, Matthew Horner, who's joining us from IMG. So let me add these gentlemen to the screen, and then we will get cooking. I'm going to add Matthew. That's not what I want. I want to go back to where I just was. I'm making a big old mess. There you are by yourself, Matthew. But there is Alex, and let me add myself back. Can I get in there somewhere? There you go. That's fine. And let me fix you here. Where are you, Matthew? I'm gonna zoom pan you in. How about that?
Perfect.
Does that
Much
work
better
for you?
Much better.
Okay. So let me go ahead and read these guys' bios so you know. What's up, Lemmy? Hello. What's up, Lemmy? Nate Snyder, Margaret Jones. Hello, Carol Lids. Arrow Michael Faring from Tampa, New York City in the house. We got people tuning in from all over the place. Let me go ahead and read these guys' bios so you know who we're talking to. So let's start with Matthew Horner. As I said before, Matthew is my manager. He's with IMG. He is the vice president and artist manager at IMG. Artist New York. Previously, he was an artist manager at Columbia Artist Management, CAMI. He does frequent master classes for singers at Yale University, the Curtis Institute, Bard College, amongst others. Matthew has also served as a judge for numerous vocal competitions, including the McCammon competition, Palm Beach, the Metropolitan Opera National Council, and many, many other things. So that's Matthew Horner joining us, I believe, from New York City. Also, we have Alex Fletcher. Alex Fletcher serves as the president of Fletcher Artist Management, a firm he founded in 2009. As president, Mr. Fletcher works closely with the selective roster of classical singers, conductors, and directors. Fletcher Artist Management responded strongly to COVID-19 pandemic, partnering with Artist Relief Tree on April 2020 fundraising concert that raised $9,000 and developed a new platform for subscribers called Fletcher Artist Management Entertainment, which showcases roster artists in dynamic and original programming. He has served on many competitions like the McCammon of Tex Words, the Birmingham competition, and since 2018, district judges for regional levels of the Metropolitan Opera Council audition and many other things. Held internships in public relations departments, Washington National Opera. I could talk. But you see the guys we have here, and so we definitely have a good group of people. Thank you, Michael Celentano, I think it is, and Craig Terry, the man, Craig Terry. Can you believe Craig Terry in his great Craig? I bow to you. I bow to you, Craig Terry. We all bow to you. But yeah, let's get started in this conversation. When you talk about agents slash managers, and maybe that can be the first question. Do you hate the term agent, or would you prefer to be called artist manager? Let's start with you, Alex.
Oh, I don't hate the term agent. I mean, I think that, in our business, you're doing both. You're an agent and you're a manager. If we were in a higher stakes industry, like Hollywood, you would have a separate agent, a separate manager. We do both. We help secure the work and we do the consulting and the advice giving. So I don't hate agent. I just picture myself like Jeremy Piven in Entourage. But I'm good. I'm good with both.
And Matthew?
I think I'm probably a little less good with agent. I think that I would add two qualifying adjectives. I would say general manager and local agent are the best way to talk about them. I really strongly prefer doing general management, and I think that that's for me the guiding of the career and the molding of the career, which I find the most engaging part. An agent tends to be someone who's tasked with something local and territorially determined, and that for me is less exciting now, having just done this long enough that it's less engaging. I still do it, but it's less of the greater challenge, because management to me connotes something where you, as I said, where you're moving pieces and orchestrating a career rather than just finding people work. As Alex said, however, we do both. I mean, there's no way to not do management and booking at the same time.
Yes. Well, here's another question. What in the world possessed you or inspired you to want to get into artist management? Why don't you take that one,
Matthew,
Matthew?
go for it.
I ask myself that every day, several times. Um, no, I was besotted by opera. Basically, I was a super fan. I was going to, standing for 100 performances a season at the Met, including three full ring cycles and all these things. I was completely mad for it, and I was given the chance. I was a sort of Marilyn Horne and Joan Sutherland were my great crushes and great favorite singers early on, still very much so. And I got to meet Marilyn, and in a very shortened version of the story, she eventually convinced me that I should go into management, and that and she introduced me to my first mentor and my first boss, Matthew Epstein at Columbia Artists. So, and in fact, our colleague Michael Benchestreet, I think, has a very similar story with Marilyn. So, not only being one of the most sublime singers ever in the history of singing, but also so generous, and I know to you too, Larry, and so many others that are listening. I'm sure really somebody absolutely extraordinary in our world, not just as a singer, but as a mentor, as a generous person in our industry.
Alex?
Well, yeah, I kind of, fell into artist management, which I think, talking to our colleagues, it's everybody comes to it from a different place. I mean, you can't really major in it, you can't, you
No.
don't necessarily set out to pursue it. But I fell in love with opera, in my teens, and I started to get to know it, and I realized I wasn't going to be on the performance side, and I started learning about the business side. And then once I had a chance to work in artist management, it just seemed like a really good fit for me and something that I was interested in. And I never looked back, but everybody comes to it from somewhere different.
Yeah. And I know both of you sing. I know Matthew sings in choir in his church, and I know Alex, you studied voice. Do you think that that is a really essential part of being a good artist manager, having some understanding of the voice and being on stage? Do you think that is helpful, Matthew?
Yeah, I think it's certainly an empathetic thing. I mean, I think that, I luckily never had any aspiration to be anything but a musician and to participate in it, because I wanted to be make music and read music and participate in music making. I never thought I had any particular talent for it, and no one else did either, so it was fine. But
But you
but
always sing me my cadenzas. You're like, Larry,
well,
you should
yes,
sing them like this.
yes.
And so, I
No,
mean,
I
your
just don't.
great your
But I
guidance
sing them
has helped
two
me so.
octaves down, and not
You
nearly
sing,
as fast.
but you sing in the choir in your church
Yeah,
tenor,
no.
right?
Yes, yes. I mean, I love singing. It's great fun. But do I think it's valuable? Yes, I do. I think being a musician is very valuable, and I think that it is certainly a vantage point that I think makes my entire work different. That I think about most things as a musician, and of course, obviously, I'm tasked also with being a business person and handling that, and that's as vital. But I I really do value being a musician. I love being a musician, and I think it helps me.
Mm-hmm. Alex?
Yeah, I think that you definitely have to have a working knowledge of singing, and I think if you have sung, that that helps as well. Matthew makes a great point. I mean, singers, the instrument is their body, so having that empathy of having used your instrument, I think really can inform your work. I would have a hard time imagining doing this work if I had no familiarity with singing and no familiarity with the voice. I do think, to Matthew's point, we're also working on the business side, so ideally we have knowledge of this, we can speak about it, we have opinions, but then we work within the team with the artist on vocal matters. But I couldn't imagine not knowing anything about singing and doing this job.
Yes, because part of being a artist manager is being someone there to sometimes offer not necessarily vocal advice, but perhaps vocal advice, especially if you have a singer that isn't having a particularly good night. And so, how do you navigate that? Because I've heard some singers saying, I know a lot of managers who have respect for singers and the art of singing and technique and everything else, that they wouldn't dare say, you need to fix this, but be able to offer some tidbits that could be helpful to them, especially in an outing that's not going particularly well. Do you think that that is also an element of your management, your manager role that you have to sometimes jump into?
Oh, I mean, absolutely, but with a very important caveat, which is I'm not qualified to fix the issue. I'm
Mhm.
in no way qualified to be a voice teacher or anything else. There are great professionals out there, as I'm not a coach. There are great professionals out there who do that and do that every day. And I respect their work immensely, and I depend upon them very much. But I certainly, at least I can hear, I think, many of the times that there's an issue, that there's, whether that's with any number of things, whether that could be a repertoire issue too, not just, oh, you're singing flat in the passaggio or whatever, but also then to try to help in finding the right source to correct it, because I'm certainly not that, and I would never dare to, because I'm just not qualified.
Alex?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's certainly something that we have to approach with tact, and it's a sensitive thing always. And I think Matthew said it well, that our role is to be able to identify those things and to be able to, within our relationship with the artist, bring that up with them, and then also help to point in the direction of a solution or an approach. You never want to approach an artist and just say this thing isn't working and then leave it there. Our role
Hmm.
is to then help them figure out what to do with it.
Do you have any qualms?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
I just
Go
just
ahead, Matthew.
just one other point is, I've had a lot of people say to me, including relatively recently, that managers should stay out of artistic advising. And I always just laugh and think, well, what possibly am I doing then? If I'm just shuffling paper, that could be done by a trained dog. I mean, that's part. The job is advice. The job is counsel.
Hmm.
If you're just, oh, I don't know, ask your teacher. I don't know, ask your conductor. That's dereliction in my book. I mean,
Hmm.
there may be others who have their who predicate their business on something else, but for me, that's an absolute tenet of what I do.
Yeah, and I think the job that you do is not an easy one, and I'm sure probably. Let me ask the question: do you have any qualms with telling one of your singers that I think you need to see your teacher because it's not, something needs to improve in whichever area? Do you have any qualms in saying that? Because that is a not fun part of your job, especially with us singers that can be a tad sensitive. But needing to address that because it really is important for them as an artist, and it makes your job much more manageable and easier when you have a product that you're marketing that's easier to sell because it's functioning correctly. Alex?
Well, I mean, the only thing I would say about it is I think you have to look at it with a holistic approach, you know? So if something is off or something doesn't seem right, I think it's always important to think about, you know, what's happening in this person's personal life. Has anything, you know, what is the context of this? Because sometimes it could be that there are other factors at play and it's not purely a technique issue. So, I mean, that's the only thing I would say. I think you know, we know our work well enough to know when we need to say something. And we have to find the right way of doing that. But I do always try to take a holistic approach and kind of consider what the various factors might be before I choose a course of action.
Matthew?
I'd agree. I mean, I think that one does it with the greatest sensitivity because one hopes that we know these individuals well enough. First of all, you do not do it after a performance. That is the worst idea on earth. Even when the singers, oh, tell me everything, tell me the truth, I want to hear it, you know, warts and all. No, they don't. No, they don't.
You mean not right?
That's a falsehood.
You mean not
Not at
right
that
before
moment.
Act Two? Not right before Act Two and the big aria?
Especially. But you know, oh, you're sounding a little, yeah. That, but I mean, no, it really with the utmost sensitivity, as Alex said, to all the things that may be going on in someone's life or whatever else. It might take some time. You might wait, you know, days or weeks in order to have that discussion because you want to have it in a proper setting. You don't want to just send an email, you know, oh, you know, having some trouble with the top, aren't you? You know that it's, you know, that's not being particularly human, let alone a good manager. You know, so I think you just have to be very sensitive about how you do it, when you do it, where you do it, all those things. But no, do I have any qualms? No, I again, it's my responsibility, I feel.
Yeah, but yes, exactly. And you know, thinking about your roles, is it kind of like, okay, I'm an artist manager, but I'm also a cheerleader. I'm also a psychologist. I'm also the bad guy. I'm also the protector. I'm also the biggest fan. Because we as artists, sometimes at any given moment, especially for what you said, Alex, in our personal lives, we may be going through things uh, that we need support in many, many areas, not just singing. Because the last thing we do, I've said to people a lot of times, is get on stage and sing. But in some aspect, we need all of those various parts of an artist manager from time to time. And so you have to sharpen your skills to be the best cheerleader or the bad guy, the one who's going to go to bat for these singers when they have a moment with the stage director who's just driving them nuts. And so how do you guys approach all of those different roles? Because they do require, your role does require you to wear many different hats, wouldn't you say? Here's my son, Caleb.
Hi, Caleb.
Honey. Okay, you can answer the question. Oh.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Go ahead.
You do wear a lot of hats and you juggle a lot of, you know, you keep a lot of plates spinning.
This is
It's
like
definitely
it's a guest appearance on the Sitdown
exactly.
with LB.
Well,
I love it. Love it.
speaking of keeping a lot of plates spinning,
There you go.
you know,
Hmm.
it's the same thing. I mean, that's a very important part of it. And again, being sensitive and aware of the individuals. Some people need more cheerleading about vocal things. Some need more help in managing other things in their life, whether that be an illness, whether that be a marital or a familial situation. It again, you have to know the individual well enough that there is no cookie cutter in management. You just don't manage everybody the same way all the time. Sure, there are principles, but then ideas that I would think, you know, carry through for all of us. I would think Alex would agree with me, but no, you have to meet that out in various ways to various individuals, and being aware of what people need at a certain moment, and providing that. Sometimes people just want to go out. I will not mention the name, but a very famous client of mine, after a particular Met broadcast, said, "I just want to go out and get drunk." And I said, well, all right. And I'm, you know, being Irish, I could do that. So I mean, you know, it's many different things, yes. And you just again have to have a sensitivity and an awareness, you know, and it is a psychological awareness too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Matthew said it well. And all of this comes back to relationships, right? We have to build these relationships with the artists so that we understand them well enough and we can navigate these things. And then, to answer your question, Larry, about wearing all these different hats and about sometimes having to go to bat, sometimes having to navigate situations, one of the hardest parts of our job, I think, is we have to have these very productive, positive relationships with presenters, but then we also need to be able to take a firm line with presenters and handle difficult situations, and stand up for our artists. And again, there the relationships are really important because we have to build that relationship with the presenter so that when we do have to take a hard stand, they don't say, what's going on here? I'm never talking to this person again. They know us
Hmm.
well enough that they know we mean business if we're stepping to the plate that way. So again, it's all about building these relationships, navigating them. Like that's so much of what this work is. And I think that's why Matthew and I love it, because it's all about people, artists, like being a part of the whole 360.
Yes, and you know what I
Truly.
go ahead. You know what I think about this, and I think of artist managers. You in your jobs, you really have to be fans of the people that you are working for, because being lukewarm about them, your approach to working for them, I could imagine would probably also be lukewarm. And so, putting yourselves with people, I know sometimes it's like a vetting situation or a filling out situation, and it's not one of those things that you, for the lack of a better term right now, jump into bed right away with this an artist. You want to kind of like figure out how they work, how they function, because I'm sure you and your jobs don't want to get phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning with someone who's psychotic, who's unhinged, who's off the rails, and everything else. But you want to feel like this person, and you can answer this. You want to feel like this person has their head on pretty well, but you feel great about what they can do and their personalities or their abilities, so you can sell them wholeheartedly, as that is what your job, what you're tasked to do. Alex.
Yeah, I mean, the times in my career when I mortgaged my belief in somebody because I thought it was the right professional opportunity, it's almost never worked out well for exactly the reasons you stated, which is that
So
this
true.
work is so personal. Yeah, we have to have a belief in people. And again, Larry, to your point earlier, that we're in a business with artists and artistic temperaments. We do expect that these are people that have to get on stage and turn it on and perform. We don't expect that we're in the C-suite and everything is going to be business jargon. But we do have to make sure that we can work with people and that we can be productive and that it can be a healthy relationship, because the worst is when you feel like you're speaking a different language with an artist, and you really can't get anything done if you just don't connect and you don't understand each other.
Matthew.
And you know, and the I mean, what underpins everything that Alex just said, which I agree with absolutely, is trust. If you don't have trust flowing both ways in the relationship, you're going to have trouble. And if you don't have trust for whatever reason, it's not working at least half of it. Whether again, like any other relationship in life, and but especially in a business relationship, if you don't have that trust, then you're in trouble. I mean, and absolutely to being a fan, and sometimes really what you said before, I'll be a cheerleader too. You sometimes have to pep people up when you can see when they're feeling down or they're feeling less confident or whatever. You do have to absolutely be there and be a fan, not a sycophant, because that
Hmm.
doesn't. I remember a colleague a former colleague who said at one point, I don't need somebody going weak in the knees every time so and so calls. That was the same person that said, I don't need an opera queen in my office, and my answer to that is yang. I mean, yes and no. You do, in the sense that you need to have somebody who's passionate and interested, because frankly, especially in those early years, you don't make any money. So you better have a lot of passion, because you're not piling up money when you can barely pay the rent. And so I think that the trust is vital, but also knowing what those roles are without, and being a fan, absolutely, but knowing also when that fan has to take on the heavy lifting, and that heavy lifting is not just about vocal troubles or about a fee that may be too low or whatever. It's everything under the sun, and you don't realize that until you've done it for a while, but something will always happen.
You know, you're talking about this, and you talk about relationships and building these relationships between singer and manager, and these are often built, as Matthew said before. You like to think about the whole idea, the whole artist, and not just a gig, but the whole picture. Uh, Building these relationships. Would you talk about how important trust is? Trust in the sense of really being honest with them. You said not being a sycophant, but someone who's, of course, can praise them when they do, when they're deservedly so, and not beat them down, but just be honest with them and tell them how they did, perhaps in with nuance and of course with kindness, but also, a lot of us want to know what someone thinks about us. And then, some managers, some agents have this great dance they do of putting a rosy picture on the fact that a lot of people just don't like you. Would you talk about, it is true, and just be that honesty that must be a part of these relationship between manager and client. Matthew.
Yeah, it's a necessity, and I mean, you do eventually have to say when somebody has asked you, 4 times, why have I never sung at this house? Sometimes you do have to say you're not everybody's taste, and or that you're or the other one in many cases is you haven't been available. They've asked 5 times, and then in the art, but in artist speak that doesn't work. Being unavailable doesn't work. Well,
Well,
surely
make
they
it
can find
happen.
something. Surely they can find something for me, and then whatever. But uh, no, you're right. The trust is born of them knowing that you're knowing what you're talking about too. And if you're just blowing smoke all the time, some of it is, as I said earlier, some of it is blowing smoke. I mean, that's too pejorative a way of saying it, but there is absolutely some of that, which is just adulation and saying, "Hey, that was special," but also knowing when you say that it means something, that you're not just such a muppet that all you do is smile and cheer all the time. That also to me doesn't really carry any weight. So when you say something, and I hope that I carry this out. I don't know. I hope so. Is that when you say something, you mean it, and that the artist, whether client or not, by the way, also to people who aren't clients, I'm not just going to rush up to people because I'm stuck next to them at a cocktail party and tell them they were wonderful. I'll talk about the weather or something, but I talk about my latest trip or something, but I'm not necessarily going to. I mean, I'm not going to be rude either, but I'll be artful about it. But no, you're right. The trust is born of that honesty, I think.
Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the interesting things about this relationship between manager and artist is that artists feel like managers have all the power because they have a lot of the information. And and in fact, as we know, the artist is the boss. They're the one employing us. They're the one paying us. We should have the intersection where everybody's on equal footing and everybody works together and trusts each other. But I think the reason the trust is so vital is because artists don't know a lot of what goes on. They don't know about these conversations with casting people in this hugely subjective business. And I'm sure that Matthew and I could give you a list of reasons that an artist hasn't been engaged that are so outrageous that we would just shut this whole chat down right now. So, it becomes really important
Amen.
that artists trust, when you say, oh yeah, that house, X, Y, and Z, or you're trying to convey what you're hearing and filtering that to artists, they have to trust that whole process. And it's hard and it's messy, so that's another reason that the trust is hugely important.
Especially when you have an artist who says to you, they're like, Alex, why haven't I sung at the Met and La Scala and Covent Garden and Chicago? And they've been in the business for like 2 weeks. They're like, I don't know why in the world why I haven't been opposite, Joel Harvey on LA Opera stage or something like that. They're like, they have this long list. And I'm sure you also have to be, look, you guys aren't shifty or shady, but you have to do a balancing act, or you have to have a certain nuance in being able to handle these difficult conversations, because the truth of the matter is maybe some of those people may never sing on the stages. Maybe it's
Right.
the fact that it may be the fact that, and I'm not going to mention names, a certain person at a company doesn't like you for whatever reason. You can sing at every other opera house in the world, but the one company you want to sing at, that person says, I just don't like Lawrence Brownlee. And so being able to talk to your artist in a way that's honest so they can understand, but still not be discouraged, because I think that's also important when dealing with a sensitive artist. Matthew.
And can I add just something that Alex said, which I agree with very much. The other thing that one has to remember in this is we don't do the casting. We are not the people with the decision-making power. We have the power to discuss with them and hopefully have a discourse with many of the the leading theaters and the places that people want to work. But we are not the people that are making the final decisions. We don't have a sort of a bag of toys that we come and present to our artists. It's not up to us. We have to make the case in the best way, the most honest way, the most convincing way to the organizations that make those decisions. But we are not the decision makers, and that's the other thing that's sometimes very hard for people to understand. We can make the case, but we're not going to be able to do the casting for the houses. I'd love to. Please, my job would be really easy, and so would Alex's. But
also hard though, because we're in a business of influence, right? And so like people will sometimes do things that are kind of shady to exert influence and to get their way,
Oh my God.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And so, so that creates a problem, because it's like there are things that I'm ethically not going to do, or that are not a part of my being, that somebody else might do, So, I mean, that's another reason in this business of subjectivity and influence, like it can be very hard because not everybody is playing the game the same way.
Here's a question I want to ask really quickly in the chat. William Dean asked the question, can a singer have a career without an agent? And because I know a lot of houses won't hear you unless you're managed.
Well, it's a tricky one. I think you can probably, I know singers that have done fairly well being unmanaged. I think it's very difficult to build it beyond a certain place if you're unmanaged at the beginning. Then there are singers that do it later in their career, which to me is the really interesting thing, So I don't know. I think, yes, you can probably do it. I think Matthew and I consider ourselves value adders. We're on the team because we're adding to this work. And so, yes, you can probably do it. But I think if you're with a good manager, it's a really strong position to be in. I think it'd be a really hard road from start to finish if you're unmanaged, depending on what kind of career you want to have. That's the other thing, is like, to your point, Larry, where do you want to be singing? What do you want to be doing?
Exactly. Matthew.
That's right. If your aspiration is only to sort of have two engagements, maybe you for instance teach somewhere and you just want to have two engagements with a local opera company a year and maybe in a company Mario role, then maybe a manager isn't necessary. But I think to have a career of international scope or even national scope, I think it's pretty tough not to. Just the number of contacts and the number of people that you need to be in touch with, even though our world is, in comparison to enormous multinational corporations, our world is relatively small. There is still a significant number of contacts that that one has to have in order to maximize one's possibilities. And is it doable? I suppose, but I think that the lack of precedent in it pretty much tells you that it's pretty tough. That there are some people that can self-manage, or as Alex said, sometimes maybe at the end of your career, you don't need someone necessarily. You have the places you're going to go. You're at a fee level that's not going to require much negotiation. But it's incredibly rare, because I think there's also that buffer in between the person engaging and the person engaged. I think is something people have, at least for about 100 years, seem to like and seem to need. So I think it's not going to go away.
Well, I mean, I know so many people in this, it's been more than 20 years that I've been in the business, and I can't count on my hand 5 people that don't have an artist manager. And I'm talking about people at the very, very, very highest level. A few of them have assistants who act as agent, and they are in positions of, I would say, real power. And so they're, the phone rings off the hook for them. And that really is a list that's smaller than 5, And so I'm not trying to answer for you, but, to this question that William Dean asked, it does it does depend on the scope, and the thing that happens too for us now, myself, that I've been in the business for more than 20 years, a lot of my friends are the people that are casting operas now in these various places. I was at Wolf Trap with some from this guy from that company, and I went to Indiana University with the the casting manager from another company, and so you can have those relationships, but still, it's really, 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 really difficult to navigate without an artist manager. That's something as an artist that I've learned myself, because just too much info. I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow afternoon. I need an
Larry,
artist
if I could
manager
just
for
jump
my
in,
life.
the one way I think it can work, is if you want to do a fest or something in Germany, and you're
Hmm.
content to have that like as a career. I mean, I know a few young artists who have done young artist programs in the States, and then they go to Germany, they navigate the system, they get a fest, and then they're employed by a house. And if they don't want to go out and do any guesting, or even if they do, I mean, they can have enough of a fabric that then they don't need to be represented. So again, comes back to what we said, which is, what kind of career do you want? What are you looking for?
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I know a lot of people are looking for agents. Do people still send you guys press packages? That's, a photo in a CD, or some of these other things that are looking for a manager. Is that something that is still happening? Or the access to social media, has that changed the way that people approach you when they're trying to look to be represented?
Alex, do you want that one first?
Oh, sure. Well, the press kit, I mean, it's so funny because, yeah, when I started in the business, I mean, that was one of my big jobs. So I had to go to the mailbox, and I had to collect the press kits, and I had to bring them up, and yeah, exactly, heave them up. And I mean, now if somebody sends us a press kit in the mail, it's like a novelty event, and my colleague Sarah will be like, "Oh my gosh, we got this press kit in the mail! Like, can you believe this? Look how beautiful the handwriting is." It's like a whole different thing now. In terms of social media and how people approach, yeah, I mean, people approach through social media, and it's a strange thing. I mean, I feel like, I want to be in touch with people. I want to be in the fabric of the business, and I want to be connected to people, but I do want to keep those professional conversations separate. And sometimes that can be tricky.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that if you're approaching managers, you should always do it through their professional channels. And, even at the most, people have written me on Facebook and said, "What's your professional email address? Because I want to send you an email." That's fine. But anything beyond that, like, I really think that it should go through the professional channels.
I agree entirely. I do get a certain number of friend requests on Facebook from people I've never met, and I just wouldn't do that anyway, because it's really not something that I use. Yes, we use it through our page and so on, but I don't really prefer it as a means for people to get to know me. If you don't know me already, I'm not sure that that's the best way to do it. Yes, I mean, not many things in the mail anymore, I must say. Unfortunately, it used to be, because boy, they used to be some fun ones. Oh my goodness, we used to keep a box of them back in the day. So there are some treasures. There's some true treasures. Occasional emails, but they're pretty infrequent now, I have to say, and
Yeah.
not so not so many through social media. Every now and again, but
Let me ask the question. So we shouldn't tweet you?
If he wants to wait 3 to 5 days for a response, he can tweet me. That's fine. I like barely ever check my Twitter.
and I'm not even on it, so.
Okay, here's a question for you. This is a good one. Is it necessary to have different management when you're overseas than here in the United States? That means, is it necessary for a person to have two management, or do you think it can be handled by one, or does it depend from case to case? And both of you can answer this. This was just a question I answered from here.
I know Matthew has a strong opinion. Go ahead, Matthew.
Well, that's pretty much everything. I mean, let me put it first of all in historical terms, because when I began in the business, which is now 25 years ago, it was really much more of a necessity to have people in particular territories, because there were a lot of reasons, much of which was communication, and this was pre-internet and everything else. No, we weren't writing on stone tablets. Calm down. But But at the same time, certainly as communication has increased, I think it is not necessarily at the of the utmost importance, but I think it also goes back to that seminal question that both of you have asked so correctly. What are you looking for? If you're looking to work, once or twice in a territory a year, every 2 years, whatever, it may not be necessary, and it may not actually be particularly lucrative or business wise for a manager to take you on in that case. If you want, for instance, to come to America once every 3 years just to sing at the Met, that probably can be handled from elsewhere at this point rather easily, because we're in communication now directly, because we have email, because we have all the other modes of WhatsApp and everything else. We're talking to a lot more people directly than we once would have been. Also, because of the preponderance of English now. When I started, again, certain territories, if you didn't speak the language in the most literal sense of speaking that local language, you might have a very difficult time. Now, with English being as ubiquitous as it is, I would say there's a lot less of that need. So I think that one can do it, but I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve in a particular territory. I think getting started in a territory, especially a territory as vast and multifaceted as Europe, I think often getting started there does help a great deal to have someone on the ground. It's not a must. It can be done without that for the same reasons I just stated, but I think it doesn't hurt to have somebody on the ground then. So,
Alex?
Yeah, I totally agree with Matthew. I've had clients who have done some work in Europe, and they've built a network. People are asking about them, and they're off to the races in Europe, and it's great. And they're doing stuff in the States. I've had American clients who have been mostly in Europe when they weren't really intending to be. I mean, it kind of goes all over the place, And I think Matthew's totally right that it depends on what you're looking for. I find for us, for Fletcher artists, I mean, we are kind of proudly an American company that has reach into Europe and that likes to work in Europe, but I think there's a lot to be gained depending on what an artist is looking for and what kind of work they're doing for them to have a representative in Europe if they want to focus a large part of their career there. Like Matthew said, there are language benefits, there are time zone benefits, there are all these benefits. And so it really depends artist to artist, and also just kind of what the market dictates and what the flow of the career is and what seems like it makes sense. And I think for Matthew and I both, like, we want to do what makes sense. We don't want to do things needlessly, but if we see that something makes sense, let's do it.
When you
um,
talk, discussing this subject right here, and it's funny. I've been in the business for over 20 years as well, and so it's interesting because I've seen where a lot of American agents have been. It seems like they're in Europe more than they are in the States, and they're just like constantly going back and forth. But with this idea that if you do world management and then worry about places, everything except for Europe, it makes your having to travel to Europe, it makes that less not as necessary because you have someone that is kind of like looking out for them in Europe as well. And then even though you may travel zip and zigzag the United States, you don't have to do that back and forth to Europe and the United States. And is that a welcome thing that you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have to deal with jet lag, and you'll make the occasional trips over to Europe maybe 2 or 3 times a year, but not 20 as it has been in the past. And I know many managers have done that. Would you talk about that?
Well, Matthew's a big traveler, so
I was
Matthew,
going
what
to
do you
say,
have to say
yeah.
about that?
Well, I used to be. I seem to have retired. I mean, yeah, I used to go to Europe about at least once a month and sometimes more. But of late, I haven't been on a plane. I'm actually approaching my 1 year anniversary this week. So,
Well, COVID.
which is not, yes, exactly, which is not at all happy for me, because it's something I really do enjoy and I do profit from. I mean, the travel for me is actually mostly an advantage, because first of all, I need and want to hear things. I want to not only see this, but also see the aesthetic of particular houses and what's going on there. And I still feel that in-person visits are something that have an extraordinary value in our business. So yes, I do travel a lot, and I'm really looking forward to doing it again soon. But it's important, I think, to be present. I no, I don't need to hear somebody's 58th performance of La Boheme. That's just being a purse holder. You don't need to run around being an artist doormat. But at the same time, it is important if there's something new, a new role, a new house, whatever, and there's a business opportunity. It's not even so much about seeing the performances as it is having the meetings. And that's really because, again, I do still believe that a personal connection, rather than just, if I just am emailing a company in Europe about, oh, so and so is so wonderful, you must have them, I know where that will go. That gets the delete key real fast. And so but if I'm there and I can make a connection, and they can see that I'm not just hawking 100 and some people to them willy-nilly, that I have a few, I hope, pointed and good suggestions that have something to do with that house, then I can make a better sale. So that for me is really important, and I still really do enjoy that. It's a critical part of the business for me.
Here's a good question, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Michael Celentano. Is the Fox system a useful system for work in the United States? Is it more beneficial to call oneself tenor rather than classifying oneself as leggero, lyric, spinto, etc.? Alex.
Well, I mean, I think you need to know what kind of singer you are and what repertoire you sing in terms of like how you're classified. I mean, certainly we know these classifications and we are aware of them. I can't say that I find myself using Leggero and stuff like that every day, So I think it's useful to know that there are different kinds of tenors and to know what those tenors should be singing. But I don't know that when you are marketing yourself, I find that people often will put that label on of like, this is the kind of singer that I am. And it's more useful in a market-based system to just kind of see what people think of you, because people might have different ideas about you. And that's part of the whole evolution of being an artist. So if he's talking about like putting on your resume, like Spinto tenor or whatever the case might be, I don't really know that there's much gain to that for me personally, but I don't know.
Matthew.
No, I agree. I think we don't need to sort of have it spoon fed to us that clearly. I mean, I think that the basic voice range is more than enough, and I don't need sort of further delineation through adjectives. I think we can hear what we hear, and we may not hear what you say. You say you're a leggera, but we actually hear that you're a lyric or whatever. This is because, again, the choice of repertoire. Gets into a whole other subject, which could be multiple of these programs, but the right choice of repertoire is one of the most critical things you can do, and one of the things I think most of us, like Alex and I, when we hear so many auditions, especially in young artist programs or through the National Council or whatever, most of that discussion, at least for me, is talking about repertoire and making sure that you choose repertoire wisely. So that, I mean, it is really important to know yourself very well, and as Alex said, but at the same time, I would say probably for that label, no, because we've never really had a Fach system over here. It's never really been that. The houses engage who they want to engage for a particular part. They don't have the house Spieltenor or the house lyric or the house, Jugendlich or whatever. It's just, engaged person by person.
And a lot of people will ask the question, well, what do you sing? What does he sing? What is his repertoire? And that right there says whether you're a lyric, a leggero, a spinto. If you're like, I sing Cavaradossi, I sing Pic Dom, I sing, Andrea Chenier, then people know that you're probably not going to be. Yeah.
Oh. What?
Not
I think
me.
we need to talk. Excuse me. We need to step into the green room for a moment.
But this is another question too. You hear a singer and he's singing Arturo. And then you're like, man, you did a really great job. Let's talk about it. And then you have a meeting. He's like, yeah, I really have been working on Rotamates. And, I'm thinking about singing Max of Mice. And, you're like, whoa, what the heck? But they are dead set on thinking that is the repertoire they should be singing. It takes some savvy to navigate that because, us singers can be pretty convinced of what we think we should be singing. And I'm sure that probably makes some relationships sour based upon that fact alone. Yes, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a working relationship with an artist and they're kind of talking about different repertoire, adding repertoire, whatever, it's much easier because you're in a dialogue. You can
Mm-hmm.
discuss it. You can kind of bat it back and forth. If it's somebody who comes to you who you don't know or you heard in an audition or whatever the case might be, um, and they're saying, yes, this is what I want to be singing, and this is what I should be singing. And Matthew and I, from all the hearing we do and all this listening and performances, know that that's not going to fly. Again, back to our earlier conversation about, delivering sensitive news. I mean, we have to say, look, respectfully, this is kind of what I think based on what I know of the business. And then the artist has to do with that what they want to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's another question that I'm gonna kind of like compile into, and this is a good one. Someone said there are singers with great voices who are much older than their voices say, and they develop at a later age. Is it difficult for these singers to obtain management? And Oliver Munar says, is there an age limit for an artist to seek representation? Ageism, is that an aspect of artist management as well?
Yes, because it's an element of our business. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, again, we have to. Again, if we think that we can make that work, I mean, it depends very much on repertoire. Let's say that first. That's the obvious thing. If somebody has come to us at 42, who's taken a bunch of years off, and says, "I'm really ready to sing Isolde and Brynhilde and Electra and so on," we're probably going to at least give them a hearing, and so on, because that repertoire is of there is never a large group of people that sing that repertoire at the international level. So in that case, then yes, because again, those voices do develop later, or they should if they're wise. Should be blooming in your 40s and not much before that. And so yes, in that repertoire, yes, I don't think that there's any ageism. I think, however, that age for a Susanna or a Norina or for a, I don't know, a
Papagena.
Papagena, I feel Papagena, Guglielmo or whatever. I think there is kind of a sell by date there, and it doesn't mean you can't sing very well at any age. Goodness knows, but yes, it's a question of what we think we can sell, and if we think that somebody who's a bit older but is singing age-appropriate repertoire that is, saleable. I don't have any parameters in that regard simply because of someone's age. But if I think that it's somebody who wants to sing a certain repertoire and is not going to be saleable for whatever reason, then that's a decision that we have to make.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because we work within a market. We have parameters within the market that are not always dictated to us. And so it's really difficult. I echo Matthew's point that if somebody sends us clips and we open them up and we're like, this is good, then we're going to look into it, even if we don't like, the resume is not there, there are gaps, whatever, especially if it's challenging repertoire and especially if it's repertoire you need to grow into. I mean, certainly to Matthew's point and to your point, Larry, with the Inas and all that, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of ageism and everybody wants the new thing. And, singers that are in their like mid 30s singing that rep really well are like, oh, can I even get hired for that anymore? Because the next crop is coming up, So it depends on the rep, and it depends on a lot of factors. But I think certainly like both of us would be open-minded about like if we hear it and it's good, even if it came out of left field, like we're going to look into it.
Yeah,
Yep.
we're getting some good questions in the chat. So here's another one. Someone asked a question. I'll ask this one first. Are there managers or agents for singers who do mainly concert and recital work?
Yes.
And I see that. I see that's from Aretha Lockhart, who
She
too.
said
I want
hello.
to say hello.
She said
Yeah, and
hello,
I
by
want to
the
say
way.
hello to her too. What a wonderful lady. Yeah. Yes. Sorry, Alex. You were saying.
No. Yeah, I mean, I think Matthew and I would have the same answer, which is there are a number of wonderful agencies, Colbert Artists, Schwalbe and Partners. What are some others, Matthew? I mean, there are some really
Who
wonderful
do
In Europe,
primarily
many
concert
many
work?
ones.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and in
Mhm.
Europe, especially in Germany, many more.
and England
Yeah.
too.
Yes.
England does a
Yes,
lot of.
also in the UK. That's
In the
right.
UK, they
Yes,
do a lot of.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And this actually echoes back to a point we were talking about earlier, because we didn't make an important distinction about a concert career in a particular territory, because
Mm-hmm.
there is some place that I would say almost always a local agent, local manager, whatever, is probably a necessity. If you are somebody who sings a substantial number of concerts, I mean recitals with piano, orchestral repertoire to some degree as well, oratorio especially, that in that case, it's probably useful to have somebody in the territory, because those tend to be relationships that don't travel as much across the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in either direction, by the way, it's also, even though the concert scene in America is more limited than it was X decades ago, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So there are agencies that certainly specialize and build a concert business, and that is one place where I would say it is fairly necessary to have a local person, because those particular areas, if you are someone who sings a lot of concerts and or recitals, those I think do necessitate that. But yes, there are specialist agencies that do that. Again, fewer than previously, but that's our world.
Here's a good one. Prepare yourself, guys. You know this is supposed to be unfiltered, right? And just straightforward. So Rebecca J. Rogers asked the question: do you turn a blind eye to an overweight man, but refuse an overweight woman? That's a good one. Matthew, jump in there.
No, I think again, it's what we can do and what we think we can do. I will say I don't think it is not up to me, because I think that society holds different standards, and I think that we unfortunately are part of a sexist culture largely, and we in the opera industry are not immune from that. So I do think that there are certain standards that women are held to in terms of their physical being that men are not. We can get it going in the chat if you disagree with me, but I'm not trying to turn this into a scandal. This is not Jerry Springer, I know, but in any case, no, I really no. For me, no. Again, it's what I think I can that I think I can take to the places that I work with and say this is the right person. And if she or he looks a particular way or anything else, you know, and again, the choice is not solely mine, again, or Alex's or anybody in our chair. It's a mutual decision. We're not saying, you know, we don't wave a magic wand and say come with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a Pied Piper situation. It's a decision that's mutual. And you know, so in that case, if you're comfortable and you believe that that person can do the work for you, no, I don't. I hope I don't. I certainly hope I don't. I don't believe I've ever used a standard in that way that was discriminatory, but it's certainly never been
Well,
my desire to do so.
Go ahead,
and I
Alex.
think as Rebecca's question suggested and as Matthew's answer confirmed, there are different standards. There is a double standard, and that's something we have to work within. I see efforts within our industry to be a lot more conscientious about this stuff, which I think is really good. But I mean, it's absolutely, something, I think Matthew and I both would try not to have that be a factor unless we thought that there would be market pressure. Because again, this is where it's tough. Is like it's not our personal feelings. It's like, okay, but can we help this person? Can we advance their
Mm-hmm.
goals?
That's right.
But I think Matthew's point was really good. That like, yeah, there is a double standard, and like we have to navigate that, just like a lot of difficulties.
And this business is really tricky, and I'm sure I'm glad you both came on here because you have to navigate a bunch of different situations, because you don't just pick up the phone and say yes, a contract for X, Y, and Z. You do so many other things, and perhaps you may have to have that conversation with one of your artists, because you want to be able to feel good about walking in the room and being able to sell them, knowing that the person you're talking to thinks that they're 30 pounds overweight. She sings great, but if she would just maybe lose 15 pounds, or he's fantastic if he was lose X amount of pounds or something like that. That is also, is it a part of your job, or do you not go into that conversation when you know
Oh,
that
of
it can be
course.
really, really helpful for a person if they would make that commitment because they're singing well, they have something to offer. You've taken them on as a client. You want to support them and not necessarily make your job easier, but be able to, in good faith, market them better because you know that that could be an impediment in them getting hired between them and someone who's maybe less talented. Matthew.
Mm. Well, first of all, I mean, I have to say that expressive, artistically significant singing is not determined by dress size or by waist size or anything else. That's just nonsense, and that has unfortunately gotten us very gummed up in the idea that larger people are inexpressive and smaller model-like people are deeply expressive. That's
Mm-hmm.
nonsense. That's nonsense. Your ability to convey meaning through text, through your physicality, whatever, is not solely the purview of what your weight is, or your dress size, your suit size, your waist size, whatever. That's something that's always bothered me. But I mean, as far as, again, the ability, it also has to do with certain other factors. If say a bass sings Hagen, they probably don't have to be particularly svelte and have to look a certain way in a suit or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for a particular production,
Mm-hmm.
or that I mean, I have clients turned down all the time for productions because the director said I'm looking for something else. And and sometimes, as it can be the case, some of those factors are odious and
Mm-hmm.
and and disgraceful in their thrust, but that's what it is. But no, I think for we have to take on what we have to take on. But your question about, do we have to have that conversation? Yes, yes, of course. Again, very, very carefully and sensitively, because there. I'm going to just say this bluntly, and I hope that I'm not offending anyone. I don't know too many people who have whatever physical issue. I mean, we're talking about weight, but I don't think most of them aren't aware of it. I think that I'm not, by saying you're bigger than perhaps is comfortable. That I don't think is a revelation to anyone. I think that it's just a question of how you deal with it and how you can say it sensitively, and to again have enough of a confidence in your dialogue. What we've been talking about on many different fronts, that you have enough confidence in that dialogue, uh, that you can have that difficult conversation. So sorry, Alex, I'm yammering.
No, no, you're good. I think this industry and this career requires so much. It's your whole life to travel and to do this stuff and whatever. That I think it's only fair that people know what kind of an industry they're in. So like, if
Mm-hmm.
people are saying to us like, yeah, this person's too big, like I wouldn't cast them because of their weight, etc. I would share that with the artist, like just so they're aware that like you want to be in this industry and this is what is being said. So like, factor that in with everything else you factor in your life. Like, is this going to work for you? Is this going to provide you the satisfaction you want? Because we're all on a ticking clock. So it's like yes, people have a passion about this. They do this because they have to do this, but it's like they need to have that information to know, like, okay, if I want to be in this business, if I want to succeed, a certain number of people are saying this and this about me, and how do I feel about that? What do I want to do about that?
Myself as an artist, I'm a 5 foot. I say 5'6", but maybe I'm fudging that a little bit. Maybe I'm 5'5.5". Uh, you know, but the fact of the matter is, I remember an agent uh made a comment about me when I was one of the winners of the Met audition, and he was like, "Man, this little guy who was like up to my kneecaps, and he was as big around as he was tall, came out on the stage," and I was like, "What is this guy going to do?" And so I was fortunate to be one of the winners of that competition that year. But I took that, what he said, for me as something that could inhibit my ability to get hired. So I actually went and lost weight. And I looked at it not at his criticism, but as a way to make myself more marketable. It was an investment I made in my career. And so I would never tell any of my colleagues they need to lose weight. But I took it upon myself in that situation to say, I think I want to make my manager or my agent's job easier because I'm going to take a reason for them to not hire me out of off the table, because they can't say he's overweight. They can't say he's short short, black, and fat. They only have two things now, or something like that. I'm giving them fewer things to not hire me for by making that commitment to myself. And so that's the way I've always tried to look at it, as an investment in myself. But leading to that, when I talk about the fact that I'm a short black man, how difficult, and this is probably not an easy question. Well, you can be the judge of that. How easy is it to be a manager of someone, an Asian person or a black person? Because if you see, it's a disproportionate amount of people that are on some of the bigger management teams. And I'm not saying that there's a shortage of singers that are good, but you see a larger representation of Caucasian people on agencies as opposed to people of color, Asian, not usually Latina, because I think they usually fall into the category of being exotic, but specifically black or Asian singers. How do you navigate that? Because I mean, obviously, Matthew, we've worked together for many years now, and you have other singers at IMG, but disproportionately, you would say there's an abundance of Caucasian singers as opposed to gifted singers, African American singers, who are sitting at home because they don't have managers because they can't get a manager. Alex, want to tackle that?
Sure. I mean, I think that this art form that we work in, it's a European white art form, and I think that for a long time we have seen a reflection on stage and on rosters that's predominantly white. And I think that we've become much more aware of it. I think that um, we are working to improve the industry. It takes time and it takes a lot of effort. It's hard in this day and age because everybody wants results immediately, which I understand, but it takes time to turn these big ships. And I do think we're going in the right direction. I I have never not signed or signed a singer because they were a specific race or a specific color or anything of that nature. I think that it's hard because people will not, at least to me, would not overtly comment on someone's race when not hiring them. It just doesn't happen. But I think that it's getting better. I think that we're all making more effort, and I think there's more awareness, and that's a good thing. So, I mean, that's kind of my brief answer on it.
Matthew?
There's an enormous amount to say on this, and and it has been said so well and by so many during this pandemic and since the murder of George Floyd, especially, and much more needs to continue to be said in all of these forums through all of our business by singers, by managers, by casting directors, by many others, because we have to keep the temperature up on this. We have to continue to make sure that it doesn't become something that had a duration and petered out, because this discourse in broader society as well is not going to go away, nor should it diminish in any way. And so I agree with Alex. I hope, and again, I certainly, without making this too personal a statement, I think we all have some biases that we have to work against every day. And I think that all we can do is do our very utmost to combat those and to work against them and to be better human beings, first of all, let alone anything about the music business. That is something that will take time. But I think that at least in the United States right now, there is there is a lot afoot that I think will be better and will be improved and more inclusive and more diverse. It's already underway. It's not something that's going to happen some lovely day down the road. It is happening now. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
Alex would agree with me. It's very much of the present moment, and it's about bloody time, and it's vital to continue to be part of that. So I would be frankly a very foolish businessman if I didn't embrace as much diversity as I am absolutely able to do, and I certainly don't think that I have ever turned anyone down because of her or his race either, just as much as I said about their physique. I think that I hope not. Again, I say I hope not.
When I think about this and this current state and the situation, what we've been talking about is letting people in the room. having other voices in the room when we talk about casting and anything else. And so this next question, and both of you, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I respect
Do
both
it,
of you
Larry.
guys
Put us on the
a
spot. That's
great
why
deal.
we're
It's
here.
okay.
That's
That's
why
why I
you're
brought
here.
my drink, because I'm ready to be on the spot.
Exactly, and I got my drink
I only
right
brought
here.
water. Good heavens.
Tell me, where are all the black agents?
I
Very
would
good
love to
question.
know because I'd like to hire one, really, very much.
I mean, there
Um,
isn't. I can't name one.
I don't think there is one that I know of. Alex,
No,
you
I
know,
think Mark Williams
I,
was the
I
last.
Mark was who worked for us, and is absolutely brilliant, and now is in a wonderful position at the Cleveland Orchestra. But no, this is the bigger problem. Getting singers in is one of the issues, and a very important, salient one that needs to be addressed and continue to be addressed, as I said previously. But as you said, a seat at the table in terms of casting directors, general directors, artistic directors, conductors, stage directors, and managers. Managers, absolutely. There must we must have representation in all of these facets of our business if there's going to be real change. Full stop in my book.
When you
Yeah,
have
and
when go ahead, Alex.
uh, I mean, we talk about the pipeline, and we all, we say, well, it's the pipeline. We don't have people to hire because they're not in the pipeline. But like, why are they not in the pipeline?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then we
I
have
think
to
it
build
goes
the
back.
pipes.
Yeah,
We have
exactly.
to
I
then
think it
build the
goes back to
pipes. I
the same
mean,
thing,
it's
which
more
is if
elemental.
Yeah, but that's
yeah, if you go to an opera, yeah, if
go
you go
ahead.
to an opera and you see all white people on stage, you're like, okay, well, that was interesting. And you're like, you're not going to say, oh, this is something I want to find out more about because I see people like me there. And like I said before, a lot of us just fall into artist management like backwards. So
Mm-hmm.
if you don't see this industry with people like you're not going to say, oh, where could I find my place in this industry? What else is there to do in this industry?
That's
It,
right.
it all again, I think, goes back to that.
There's been conversations, and with a lot of us talking about these subjects, and all of us are waking up. We haven't been asleep, but we're waking up now, saying, "Look, where are the casting directors? Where are the agents? Where are the general directors? Where are the people of color?" And you talk about the pipeline, the farm team, if you want to call it that, for a large time, and we've had this conversation before. It seemed like people who become agents are is predominantly uh, gay white men, and that's not a criticism. That's kind of like what it's been. It's like you
That's true.
gravitate towards because that's what it is. And so there are people who are listening tonight and who are like, I think I would be a great agent. I think I know the repertoire. I think I know singing. I love to travel. I'm a good salesperson. I understand the business. I have all these things, but I don't even know how to break into artist management. How does that young Asian woman or that young black man or whoever it is that wants to be an artist manager now, how do they begin to get themselves positioned so they can begin the study or the practice of getting into artist management? I know, look, COVID notwithstanding, so it's a difficult time with all the
Right.
business and so many of the bigger agencies closing and everything else like that. But still,
Mm.
these people who have this desire to get into artist management, who are not, in that specific demographic, how do they approach it to get their foot in the door to become a manager?
Well, I see Laquita's comment, about Uzan's program that they've started. I think that's really important. And we've seen some other people starting programs that I think those are important just to give people an opportunity to like interface and like get to know people. So I think that is kind of one part of it. I try to be as transparent and available as I realistically can be. So if people ask me like, hey, can I talk to you about management or like being a manager, or if people say like, oh, my friend told me such and such, like, would you have a few minutes to talk? I will try my best to like actually talk to people because again, we're in this little group, we're like in this tower, and everybody's like, how'd you get there, like how'd you get up there, what's going on, like, so I try to be like available and talk to people about this stuff. I think the programs are important. I think like talking to people is important. And I think, again, like building that reflection on stage is important so that people are like, oh, okay, interesting. Like, I see some people that are like me. I wonder what this is about. Let me learn more about it. Because opera itself has barriers to entry. So, like, you have
Mm-hmm.
to first get over those hurdles to figure out the business part of this, is another thing. Like, the art part of it is something you have to, like, be like, oh, okay, let me figure this. Wait, what's going on here? And, like, this is another language. And I mean, you have to get into it.
Matthew.
Agreed. I mean, I think, we will certainly be, when we're able to get back to full staffing, which we are far from right now.
I
Uh,
know.
Let me tell you, look at the gray hair. Um, but in any case, when we are, I am quite certain that we will be making a robust effort to get people into at least an internship situation, and hopefully very quickly into a hiring situation. I am always out looking for and talking to people. Again, one of the unfortunate results of the pandemic, we're not meeting as many people right now and not seeing as many people as we normally would in the discourse of our business at an after party or whatever else, so that we can continue to, because I have a very particular, I have characteristics that I think would make a good manager. And there are lots of people that like opera or like singing or like recitals or whatever, who I don't think are suited to management. Just as I may have all sorts of great and wonderful opinions about singing, but you certainly don't want to hear me sing it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so I mean, not everybody is qualified and not everybody is able to do it. So I trust, as with singers, I trust my instinct, and I would want to have many more of those conversations. And absolutely, Alex's point is an excellent one. I've tried always to make myself available to people that have said, hey, I might like to be interested in management, could I talk to you or one of your colleagues or whatever. I've really tried to be as responsive to that as I possibly can, because it's really important. It is a business, as you said, Alex, before, that you learn on the job. You don't go to school and come out an artist manager. You learn it on the job, basically. There are programs, yes, you can study arts management now and such, but I certainly didn't. I studied because I had two great mentors who were brilliant at what they did and were generous with their time and willing to engage in the didactic process of telling me what I did well and what I didn't. And so that was really valuable, and that's something I've believed in. I think that I've had a lot of people that have worked with me that have gone on to success, of which I am more proud than anything. And I want to perpetuate that to whomever it is that I possibly can. And that is, I hope, again, as I said earlier, to the very best of my ability without any bias whatsoever.
I've here's another question for you. I was talking to someone and I see some great comments. Thank you guys for being so active and just engaged. This is really, really wonderful stuff you guys are giving me tonight. Kamon Murray, I think he's the twin brother of the guy who won Houston Grand Opera finals. Key, I believe they're twins. So anyway, Kay, he said there's a University of Kentucky Arts Administration program, and I know Laquita was talking about the thing with Uzan and other programs that are trying, and there are things in the pipeline, things that I'm actually even working on to try to put people, position them to be able to achieve these various roles. I said to someone before, having recently heard, I heard the Porgy and Bess at the Met last year. That course was loaded with exceptional talent, loaded. And I said to myself, it was a conversation I was having with a few friends of mine. We talk from time to time. If somebody, whoever it would be, if it were a black person, would just take 50% of the people, because probably 85% of the people on that stage are unmanaged, from the course and everything else. They're not less talented at all. But if they would take that and they would have a roster of incredible talent, but how difficult would it be for them to have an all-black roster, then be a black artist management and have an all-black roster and try to sell them to these various houses and organizations? So maybe that's not a solution, to have an all-black agency trying to represent them singers. But something like that could be useful for people who have the talent, in order for them to get a place in the door. Because I said before, there are many places where you can't even audition if you don't have a manager.
True. That's absolutely right.
And this idea that, here's another question too, and I know I'm saying a lot of stuff. When you think about the fact that some people are sitting on rosters right now where they haven't worked in 10 years, but they're still on that roster because it'd be better for them to have a manager because managers are so scarce, you know? I guess what I'm trying to say, do you advise a singer ever to leave an agency if things aren't working out? If they haven't worked in 10 years, but they just have to be on a roster because they can't be heard. That's a hard one, I know.
Have I advised people to leave? Sure, of course. I mean, and that's of any stripe. I mean, it depends on the situation. The most important thing if you're leaving a manager, however, is that you have to have dialogue. I think one of the most difficult things is when you get the call, oh, thank you so much for everything. I'm changing management. Bye-bye. Never a discussion, never any kind of dialogue about why or what's wrong or what's good or what's bad. That to me says a lot about an individual if that happens. But yeah, you're right. You're right. Absolutely. I think that if you need to make a change and if you feel that something has come to a stagnation point, sure. But I think the other point that is inherent in what you're asking is there are more singers in the market than there are jobs to be had. And that is, Jasmine, my former colleague, is that there are not enough jobs. And that's one of the biggest problems we have right now, that many universities and conservatories are graduating enormous numbers of singers, and many of them will never actually work. And they've probably paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for that education and maybe in significant debt and may never work. And that's really that is a reality that has to be confronted by our business and our world, not just the business of music, so-called, but also the educational system at large, because I think that there are too few opportunities, and I think there are too few managers. I think most of us are up to our eyeballs. I think that there are, and now there have been a number of smaller agencies founded even since the pandemic for various reasons, and I'm very happy about that, because many of them have been founded by very, very eminent qualified professionals in our field. But I think that there are still more managers needed.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think scarcity is a major driver in the business, in terms of the fact that we don't have enough jobs for the people that we represent, and there aren't that many managers. And I think always I try to be in dialogue with artists about their goals and what are we achieving and, how are we doing? And if someone is not working, or if there seems to be inactivity, I try to be open and honest with them about, okay, this is what we're facing and like, what do we think about it and that sort of thing. What I find is people say to me, like, somewhat often, like, oh, Alex, everybody loves you, Alex. Like, nobody has a bad thing to say about you. And that's really nice. It's nice to hear. But when I tell artists, like, hey, I'm not sure I'm the right person for you now, like, I'm not sure that this is actually working, they're like, but this is the guy that everybody says, so then why, and so it's like they don't want to go anywhere else. And that creates a problem.
Like, go.
Well, because like, if we can all be effective for like a 40-year partnership, that's amazing. That's the dream.
Amazing.
But like, more than likely things are going to change. Like, you're going to be effective for a period of time together, and then for whatever reason, like, it's not going to be the right thing anymore. So, I find that's hard. I find that artists that like maybe would benefit from making the jump, like, and having a different energy, having somebody represent them a different way, they're cautious to do it, because they're like, oh, but Alex is a good name in the business. But it's not always about that. Sometimes it's about having a refresh, having a different energy. So yeah, I mean, there's so much to be said on that
Yes.
topic, but to Matthew's point, I think like being in communication is the biggest thing. Like, when somebody blindsides you, either way, if we blindside an artist, which I would try never to do, or an artist blindsides
absolutely.
you, that's like, that's the worst, because it's like, well, what was happening? Why weren't you talking? Why weren't you in conversation?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Here's one. And guys, this is really, really great stuff. Here's one question as we're getting close, and I don't want to keep you guys too long. I really don't, but this is excellent stuff. Laquita just wrote something. Can you please talk about this? The music educational system is doing a disservice to so many. And right now, as we're in COVID and coming out of COVID, there are a lot of young singers who want managers. There are a lot of young artist people who want managers. There are a lot, as you just said, there are so few managers, and there are a lot of people, whose agencies have collapsed or closed down, and they're without management. So in the big pool of people that are looking for management, some people are asking, how do you approach a manager? What do I do? When is the right time? There are a lot of questions in that. Moving forward, post COVID, what do you hope is the situation? With all these people who are coming out of school and all these people who are coming out of the young artist programs and all these other people, you hope that more managers can come, but you still need more work to be there too. So what is your, I guess the big question is, what is your outlook on the immediate future post COVID of this industry, with the shortage of manager, with an overabundance of singers that are looking for management?
Well, that's the thing. I'm not like we don't have enough managers, but I'm not sure we have a shortage of them, because that's the whole issue, is that like there are so few jobs available that even on our rosters where we represent really fantastic people, not everybody is employed as much as they should be. So this is, I mean, to go to Laquita's question about the music education system, like, yeah, I mean, there are so many singers that are not being spoken to in an honest and real way about what their career
Totally.
prospects are.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
And I used to love that NCAA commercial that said, like, whatever the percentage was of the college athletes are going pro in something other than sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's kind of what it is for our business. Like, people who are studying singing, most of them are not going to be professional singers. So that is such a massive issue to tackle, and I know that Opera America and other places are trying to like build that bridge between the educational system and the professional system. But there are so many people who should not be pursuing a career and never are spoken to in an honest and respectful way about what their
That's
career
right.
prospects are. So I mean, that's one thing. I don't know, Larry. We had like three questions in there. What was the
Yeah, it was a
what's the
lot.
next question?
Well, I guess the whole idea, the big question was, coming out of COVID in this whole situation where there are a whole bunch of people who want managers. What are you gonna do now when it's just like you won't be able to take even a fraction of those people who want to be managed and potentially have the talent to be managed? It's like the stakes are
It's really
higher
hard.
now. I know it
Yeah.
can be even depressing. I don't know, Matthew.
Oh, sure it is. Of course it is. I mean, because there is still very fine talent coming, and we have to still be there and responsive to that. I mean, the old canard about managers. Oh, I'm too busy and I have too many people. And well, if Birgit Nielsen comes along, hello, buenos dias. I mean, of course we're gonna make room. Of course. I mean, come on. That's we're not idiots. I mean, so I mean, at the same time, it's just what you think. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but it's what we think the market can bear. And we personally, and certainly in my case and Alex's and many of our colleagues, I think it's a question of how much we feel we can do responsibly without overloading ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not easy, because the marketplace is saturated and oversaturated, and there isn't enough work for good singers, let alone bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
But to the point that Laquita and Jasmine and others are making, you're right. We have to figure out a way that people don't end up paying for 2 or 3 or more degrees. I mean, singers are often encouraged to do an undergrad, a master's, and then a performing certificate, a certificate in
Mm-hmm.
opera,
$100,000 in debt.
oh, and more, and
Easily.
well more, well
Mm-hmm.
more, and with very little to show for it. Now, when I say very little to show for it, I don't just mean new productions of Covent Garden and Munich and the Met. I also mean people that are working in their chosen profession and making a living, whether that's in a choral job, whether that's in education, whether that's in whatever. There are other things, but as a performer, I think we have to have a reality check in a big way. and because there are just too many people. And I know how difficult that can be because, some people bloom at different ages and so on
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. But I think at some point there has to be somebody, or quite a few somebodies actually,
Mm-hmm.
that eventually say, hey, you really may be the nicest guy or gal in the world, but it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, and I'm really sorry.
And that
I
happens.
think
That should happen before they get to you, because ultimately they won't get to you. Should be
Mm,
right. Go ahead,
yeah,
Alex.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think, the in terms of like adding to our rosters and like where is that going? I mean, I think the hardest thing about the pandemic is like we're all doing a ton of work, but it's like not the work that we're used to doing. And Larry, you
yes,
know this. You're
yes,
doing all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of stuff right now. We're
including this
all doing
conversation.
all this. Yeah, we're all doing all this work, and it's hard to gauge like what is my actual capacity to add anybody else because we're like so out of
Mm,
our element in terms of the work we normally do. And so
bravo,
it's been rough
bravo.
because like companies close, rosters are dismantled, and then people are coming to us. And I'm like, I don't know if I actually have capacity to work for you because we're in this displaced position. Then to
Mm-hmm.
Matthew's point, like part of our business strategy has to be that like when somebody we really feel strongly comes about, we have the room to bring them on. And so it's really hard because we're always telling people, oh, we don't have space, we don't have time. But then if it's the right space, if it's the right time, and that is, I mean, that is part of what we do, which is hard, so it's a bleak landscape a little bit that way, but I do think the positive side of it is like what Matthew said, which is like smaller agencies are cropping up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna go against what I just said, which is like, oh, we shouldn't have more managers. If they're the right kind of people doing the right kind of work and they
Mm-hmm.
know what they're doing and they're adding to singers' careers, like yes, we need those people. And I do think we're seeing some more of them. And the barriers to entry in terms of being a manager have never been lower. I mean, you literally
That's
don't
true.
need anything right now.
You
So
need
if
a
you
And
know what
cell
you're
phone,
doing,
a
get
cell
in,
and
phone, and yeah,
I
a couple
as
post-it
somebody said,
notes.
I wish that I could remember who actually said this. You have to be certified to cut someone's hair in New York State, but you could be an artist manager and absolutely no bupkis. So I mean, you can put your shingle out there and try to attract clients, and you don't even know how to spell Traviata. But I mean, you can do it. It's fairly unregulated as those things go. So in Boca Lupo, what can I say? I mean,
Right. Oh my gosh. Look, we're already at an hour and a half, and I said I wasn't going to keep you guys longer than that. You guys have been so wonderful. Oh man, I
thank
mean, it it
you,
it
Larry. Really.
almost it almost needs to be a round two, but I'm not gonna like. I'm not gonna ask you guys to do that.
Well,
But there's
if
so,
if you
but
if you've got it in you, I'm certainly happy, and especially in Alex's company, which I
there's
esteem so greatly. So,
here's the last question I'll ask you, because the thing is, people
ditto.
keep writing it here. What advice? Sorry, this is it, and that's it. What is the best way for people that are looking for a manager, and these guys are not available because they're, they're doing whatever. But if someone is seriously, they're like, I'm looking for a manager. How do you advise them in today's market?
I always say if you're contacting a manager, do it through a mutual third party. I think that's always the best way to go. If you can either have a third party reach out on behalf of you, or if you can reference that person in your communication and they know they're being referenced, that's the best way to go about it. Because I'll always, if I see someone's name that is in my orbit and that I take seriously, I'm always going to look carefully at whatever's coming across. So that would always be my biggest piece of advice. If you're reaching out to a manager, go through a third party that there's a connection there.
Mm-hmm.
that's you hit the nail on the head, Alex. Absolutely right. I will always take seriously if somebody that I know says this person is good, and that whether that's a voice teacher, a coach, an artist, a director, a casting director, whoever it may be. I will always make an absolute effort to at least hear somebody and then offer advice. That doesn't mean, by the way, that I can take them on necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
but in any case, I'm more than happy to at least offer some advice if I possibly can. I mean, right now, of course, even auditioning is rather problematic,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but when we sometime return to some sort of normalcy and a slightly different world, I always try to, at least as much as I possibly can, offer some feedback. Even when I hear young artists in a program or something, even a couple of sentences, which will be for all parties slightly dissatisfactory, but at least it's an attempt to offer something that that can be valuable. So, but by all means, as Alex said, through a connection, through somebody that sending things anonymously is kind of basically fruitless. I can tell you categorically, I've never taken anyone from unsolicited materials ever.
Mm-hmm. So great. So there you guys, you have your answer. So Alex, Matthew, you guys have been, don't tell anyone, but this has probably been my favorite episode of this series inside the industry. We're not going to even say anything to the other people, and they've been really, really fun, but this is just,
of course,
you guys have been very transparent and very open and answering some of the difficult questions, but my audience has my chat group. They've been so lively and throwing out stuff.
Wonderful,
so
wonderful.
Thank all of you, Rebecca, Aretha, Adam Richardson. You know it. Laquita Mitchell, so many people, Leon Brown, Jim Lieberthal, Jasmine, Stephanie, Janine, gosh, I could go, Oliver, Sasha, gosh, Nate Snyder, Leon Brown, Rachel Cooper, Aretha Lockhart, Jenny, Kristen O'Keefe, Mark Ketterson, okay, Selena Perryman, so many people here.
Thank you.
I could say your names forever. Jack Lynch, thank you all. Nate, David Lee, Rachel, everybody, thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you all
to this episode. Thank you guys for being so open and just forthcoming with information and advice. And I hope it was helpful. I think people really got a lot out of it, so I appreciate that. Thank you thank you, gentlemen. Have a wonderful night, both of you. Thank you.
And LB, we need to talk tomorrow. Don't forget.
Yes, Matthew, we need to talk tomorrow. Yes, we have. Look, here you go. Here you go from a client to a manager right here in front of everybody else.
Exactly.
We need to have a conversation tomorrow.
Exactly. And it's not about any of the things we discussed tonight, I assure you.
It's actually, great. It's important stuff that we have to talk about. But yeah, we got to talk about a couple of things. So let's just
indeed.
You call me or I'll call you. But
sounds good. No, we'll take care of it.
We'll do it.
Yeah.
So
great to see you, Alex.
Thank
Greetings
you
as well.
Yeah, everybody, thank you so much. And I just want to give a shout out for Adam Richardson. Adam Richardson made a reference to the shirt I'm wearing. It is no secret that I am a big fan of Novak Bartholomew Djokovic, who just won the Australian Open. He reached number 18. That is the insignia of Novak Djokovic. I wore this for Jamin Maple and Kenneth Overton and the rest of the group in our tennis group, but I have to represent Novak. Adam says Novak Djokovic. Anyway, no. Okay, thank you guys. Go to sleep wherever you are. I appreciate you all. Make sure you tune in. I will be talking next time. It'll be a good one. Thank you, Laquita. I see that. I will be talking to casting agents, artistic administrators. That will be a really, 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 really good one. So make sure you tune in. It's been fun. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful night. See you next time on the Sit Down with LB. That was a good one, man. Wow. People loved
really good. It was
people
great, Larry.
loved it. Man, they went crazy in the chat box. They really, 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 really loved it. So